The chapter opens with the sound of cameras as Sung Jinwoo, holding a flower and wearing a formal black suit, attends the funeral for those who died during the Jeju Island raid. The raid, which has become a national topic, gave the public a rare chance to see Jinwoo in action since becoming an S-rank hunter. Many online comments focus on his strength, with some expressing awe, such as, "I thought it was impossible to summon that many beasts," or "Watching him fight the ants cured my cancer." One person shares, "I lost my parents in the Jeju raid, but Jinwoo will never see this post." As debates about his abilities continue, some suggest he should be considered a national-level hunter, while others argue he's not quite there yet. Still, most agree he was amazing during the raid. There are also questions about how someone who started as an E-rank could become so powerful, with speculation about whether Jinwoo had a second awakening. Some people note that his identity protection kept his full story hidden. While the entire country remains focused on the success of the raid, Sung Jinwoo continues to be the center of attention. Though he receives much praise, some criticism follows as well. One comment questions, what if Sung Jinwoo had joined the raid from the start? Maybe Min Byung-gu wouldn't have died. Others wonder why he decided to join halfway through, speculating that if he had been there from the beginning, the death toll could have been lower. While many people support Jinwoo, few try to refute the criticism, acknowledging the truth behind the casualties. This moment of reflection is highlighted as Jinwoo offers a flower at the memorial for Hunter Min Byung-gu. The scene shifts to Jinwoo standing before Byung-gu's photo, while friends and family of the fallen gather around. Among them is Baek Yoon-ho, Min Byung-gu's close friend. When their eyes meet, Yoon-ho approaches Jinwoo and says, "I always believed that a single hero couldn't end a war by himself. But after the events that transpired, I've started to think I might have been wrong." He then adds before they part ways, "Chin up, Mr. Sung. You were able to end this tragedy. Thank you." As tears can be seen on Yoon-ho's face. As Jinwoo walks away, he notices Hae-in looking at him. Their eyes meet briefly, and she quickly looks away, blushing. Jinwoo is left puzzled by her actions. Returning his gaze to the graves of the fallen, Jinwoo reflects on the statistics of the raid. A total of 4,801 hunters participated in the 5th Jeju Island raid, along with 727 awakened civilians who were called to arms. Sadly, 64 awakened beings and 32 civilians perished in battle. Despite the dismal death toll, this raid had the least number of casualties compared to the previous 4 attempts. The scene shifts to Jinwoo and Chairman Go, who are sitting together having a discussion. Chairman Go confirms if Jinwoo plans to form his own guild. He mentions that certified S-rank hunters no longer need to obtain a guild master's license. All they need is to make a phone call to the association. Jinwoo agrees to this. In his mind, he realizes that he needs to look into what kind of benefits he might receive as an S-rank hunter while he's at it. Chairman Go suddenly asks, "Did you cast some barrier on the Jeju Island?" Jinwoo, surprised, asks, "Pardon?" Chairman Go explains that soldiers and hunters sent to clean up the ant corpses and collect essence stones lost consciousness. These were all A-rank or B-rank hunters, and even members of the Knights Guild were affected. He wonders if Jinwoo might have unknowingly cast a barrier. Jinwoo denies having done so, and Chairman Go responds, "I see. I didn't think so." Curious, Jinwoo asks what the soldiers and hunters had to say. Chairman Go answers that they have no recollection of the events that occurred before they lost consciousness. Therefore, there's no way to know if they were placed under a magic spell, as Chairman Go rubs his head. Jinwoo says nothing but wonders if perhaps the ants left behind a trap. Just then, a member of the association approaches Chairman Go. Chairman Go then stands up and informs Jinwoo that he needs to leave because he has a guest who arrived earlier than expected. He thanks Jinwoo for his time, and Jinwoo replies, "Don't mention it." Jinwoo, thinking he should also head out, walks to his car. Just as he's about to open the door, a man approaches him and asks, "Excuse me, are you Sung Jinwoo?" He introduces himself as Adam White, a senior official from the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Adam hands Jinwoo his business card and says, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sung. Feel free to call me Adam." Adam apologizes for the sudden appearance, explaining that he's been difficult to track down. He adds that he even stopped by their office. Jinwoo, now thinking Adam might be the person Jinho mentioned who was looking for him, asks, "What business do you have with me?" Adam responds that he wants to share some information with Jinwoo. Jinwoo, intrigued, asks, "What kind of information?" Adam replies, "Perhaps no country or institution in the world could provide the information I'm about to share, except us." Jinwoo asks why they're willing to share this information with him, and Adam explains, "Because we benefit from sharing knowledge with special individuals like you." He further explains that they had planned to visit him for another reason, but after seeing the events of the Jeju Island raid, their deputy director wanted to meet him in person. Adam smiles and adds, "I'd say this is unprecedented, and our deputy director will explain the rest of the details. There's a car nearby if you'd like to meet with him." Jinwoo, now curious about the information Adam wants to share, gets into his car and thinks, "Information, huh?" He continues to ponder, still unsure if the details they wish to provide are reliable. He tells Adam that he will give it some thought and contact him later. Adam, smiling, comments, "How silly of me. I forgot that a good hand should never be hidden when striking a deal." He then adds, "An upgrader." Jinwoo is taken aback, and Adam explains, "An upgrader is an awakened being who can enhance the abilities of another awakened being. Have you heard of them?" As he asks Jinwoo, the scene shifts to a car as Adam and Jinwoo arrive at a building. Adam then introduces Jinwoo to Michael Connor, the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Michael shakes Jinwoo's hand and says, "It's a pleasure to meet you." After the introductions are made, Adam announces that he will serve as their interpreter. Michael, being direct, slides a stack of immigration documents across the table and says, "It usually takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years for processing, but we're willing to make an exception for you." He adds, "Just say the word, and you'll be granted American citizenship in a second." Jinwoo, however, responds seriously, "I came here because Mr. White said you have some information to share with me. An awakened being who can enhance the abilities of another awakened being, an upgrader. Is it possible for a hunter's abilities to be upgraded?" Jinwoo asks. Michael smiles and replies, "Actually, the person who possesses such power is here right now." He looks to the back and instructs his staff, "Please tell Ms. Sellner to come in." The chapter ends as a woman, known as an upgrader, approaches Jinwoo. The chapter begins with Mr. Connor introducing Norma Sellner to Jinwoo, informing him that she is the only person in the world capable of enhancing the abilities of awakened beings. As Jinwoo observes Ms. Sellner, he thinks to himself that she seems like a completely different type of awakened being. Michael then speaks up, telling Ms. Sellner to explain to Jinwoo the extent of her powers. Ms. Sellner began by addressing Jinwoo, acknowledging that he might be skeptical about what she was about to say. She added that everyone had the same doubtful look when they first heard it. However, she told him that once he experienced her power, he would beg for more. This made Mr. Connor call out to Ms. Sellner as he saw her approach Jinwoo. Ms. Sellner explained that Jinwoo might already be aware that every awakened individual has a limit to their strength, and no one can surpass that limit. An awakened being's rank would always remain the same unless they undergo a second awakening. This was common knowledge among hunters. Jinwoo then asked her, "But you can change that?" To which Ms. Sellner responded, "Yes." She revealed that she had the power to help awakened beings break through their limitations. Through a process of 3 stages, she could lift their limitations. She added that she didn't even know what to call this power, but she was capable of performing a force reawakening, or in simple terms, she could bring out a person's true potential. Mr. Connor agreed with her and confirmed that everything she said was true. However, he pointed out that Ms. Sellner would need a long period of rest after each use of her power. Because of this, she could only help 3 or 4 individuals per year. Jinwoo thought to himself that he would be one of the 3 or 4 people she would help. If what she said was true, then she must have an incredible ability. He then asked, "How effective is the process exactly?" Ms. Sellner explained that the results would vary for each individual, but after going through all 3 stages, an individual would experience a strength increase of anywhere from 20% to 30%. Upon hearing this, Jinwoo was stunned. A 20 to 30% increase in strength seemed insane. He now understood why Hwang Dong-soo had decided to go to America, despite facing so much public criticism. Jinwoo thought to himself, who would turn down such an offer? Any hunter would jump at this opportunity. He then asked, "What if someone finds out about her powers?" Mr. Connor replied, explaining that this was exactly why she is under their care. They would ensure her safety while compensating her with a suitable salary. In return, Ms. Selner would help enhance the abilities of their selected hunters. Mr. Connor then introduced Ms. Selner to Jinwoo and told him that her power would be used on him as a gift. Jinwoo, still doubtful, asked, "You mean as an offer?" To which Mr. Connor clarified that once he became a hunter for the Federal Bureau, he would be given top priority and receive preferential benefits. Additionally, they would arrange meetings with the guild of his choice and help him sign the best contract. Ms. Selner slid the plate across the table and told Jinwoo that he didn't need to decide right away, as they were only easing him into the idea for now. Jinwoo asked, "Excuse me?" Ms. Selner reiterated that, as they said, this was a gift. Afterward, Mr. Connor asked for permission to lift his limits. Jinwoo asked, "For nothing in return?" Mr. Connor explained that he should think of it as a complimentary service. Jinwoo, remembering Ms. Selner's words that he would beg for more once he experienced it, realized she was confident in her results. Ms. Selner then asked Jinwoo to hold out his hand and look into her eyes closely. She told him this was the first step. Michael, watching the scene, thought to himself that Jinwoo had already taken the bait and was doing well, keeping his cool. However, once the first stage was complete, he believed Jinwoo would likely try to reach out to them. He also considered that if Jinwoo is an impatient type, he would likely sign the papers right away. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's hand began to glow as Ms. Selner held it. Mr. Connor reflected on Jinwoo's past achievements, how he had succeeded in the Jeju Island raid with powers that had never been seen before, and wondered what else Jinwoo could accomplish. As a green aura surrounded Jinwoo, the light in his eyes intensified. As the process continued, Ms. Selner's eyes began to glow, and she was enveloped by a powerful aura. Suddenly, it became clear that Ms. Selner had shifted to a place filled with darkness. A face appeared behind her, where only darkness remained. Gradually, a figure emerged from the shadows and slowly approached her. The figure came closer until it was right in front of her, staring at her with a terrifying light in its eyes. At this, Ms. Selner screamed, and the process was abruptly halted, shocking everyone in the room. Suddenly, some of their agents drew their guns and pointed them at Jinwoo, demanding to know what he had done to Ms. Selner. Mr. Connor angrily shouted at them, asking if they had lost their minds and if they didn't recognize who Jinwoo was. He called them morons and told them to go check on Ms. Selner if they were concerned. Mr. Connor bowed his head and apologized to Jinwoo for the agent's behavior, saying they had stepped out of line. Jinwoo, still shocked, replied, "It's all right." Angrily, Mr. Connor approached one of the agents and told him that if they had done something like this to Thomas Andre or Lu Jigang, they would all be dead by now. He coldly ordered, "Got it." The agent, terrified, quickly agreed. Mr. Connor then asked Ms. Selner what had happened, noticing that she was still trembling. He remarked that she was drenched in sweat and asked if she was feeling unwell. After that, Mr. Connor explained to Jinwoo that Ms. Selner was feeling under the weather and asked if it would be okay to reschedule the procedure for another time. Jinwoo agreed. Afterward, Mr. Connor instructed Adam to escort Jinwoo out of the room. Once Jinwoo left, Mr. Connor turned to Ms. Selner and asked what had happened. Her face was still filled with fear, and her hands trembled as she stuttered, "He's a king, and a powerful one at that." Mr. Connor was stunned by her words and asked if she meant Jinwoo was as strong as a national-level hunter. Ms. Selner shook her head, unable to explain further. She revealed that she hadn't experienced anything like this before. "He is a king," she repeated, "but not an ordinary one." She explained and said, "While I was looking at him, he was also looking back at me, an infinite darkness within him." The chapter concluded with Ms. Selner's words hanging in the air. On top of that, there is no limit to his power. The chapter begins at the Hunter Association office, where Chairman Go is seated in despair, his face covered by his hands. In his mind, he still couldn't believe they had lost a hunter like Min Byung-gu. However, he also knew that Byung-gu had already retired, and it couldn't be said that he was still an active hunter. It was heartbreaking that his death was being labeled a noble sacrifice. Chairman Go also realized that even greater challenges awaited them. There was a high possibility that they would face even more death and destruction than they had this time. Suddenly, his phone rang, and he received a report that a B-rank gate had appeared in the middle of the highway. Chairman Go thought to himself that a regular strike squad wouldn't be able to handle a B-rank gate, so he decided to call the major guilds for assistance. However, he paused when he remembered that Sung Jinwoo had opened a new office nearby. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was on his way home, riding in his car after meeting with the upgrader, Norma Selner. He was sure that the upgrader had noticed something about him, but he couldn't figure out exactly what it was. Jinwoo wondered if the upgrader had caught a glimpse of the system, which made him nervous because he had seen the look of terror in her eyes. After the encounter, Jinwoo doubted she would want to meet with him again. As Jinwoo noticed the heavy traffic, he thought to himself that this was why he preferred taking the subway. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Chairman Go. He answered the call, and Chairman Go informed him about a gate that had appeared in the middle of the road, which surprised Jinwoo. He realized that this was likely the cause of the traffic jam. Chairman Go then asked, "Could you take care of it, Mr. Sung?" Jinwoo asked if it was okay for him to enter without an entry permit. Chairman Go laughed and jokingly asked Jinwoo who he thought was in charge of entry permits. Jinwoo responded that it was the Hunter Association. Chairman Go then asked, "And who do you think you're speaking with?" Jinwoo smiled and replied, "The chairman of the Hunter Association." Chairman Go reassured him, saying there was nothing to worry about. Jinwoo responded, "Then I'll gladly take the free experience points. Thank you." Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the gate in the middle of the highway. A large crowd had gathered, including reporters. Based on the reports, the gate had appeared at an expressway. Some of the onlookers were urging people to follow their directions. One female Hunter Association member tried to stop a man from entering the restricted area, stating that it was off-limits. When she noticed the man, she was taken aback and asked if he was the S-rank hunter Sung Jinwoo. People in the vehicles nearby also recognized Jinwoo and exclaimed, "That's Sung Jinwoo. It looks like he's going to take matters into his own hands." The woman, although stammering, questioned Jinwoo about why he was there. She reminded him that even though he was an S-rank hunter, it didn't mean he could ignore the protocol. She then asked if he had an entry permit for the gate. When Jinwoo didn't respond immediately, she insisted that even if he had a permit, he couldn't enter unless the required number of hunters were present. In Jinwoo's mind, he was simply following Chairman Go's instructions. He took out his phone and called Chairman Go, telling him that he was at the gate, but there was a bit of a problem. He then handed the phone to the woman and told her to take the call. The woman was surprised and asked who was on the other end of the line. Jinwoo casually replied, "Someone you won't be able to argue with." On the other end, Chairman Go's voice could be heard, saying, "This is Go Gunhee speaking." The woman, now trembling, replied, Yes, of course, I'll follow what the chairman says." Jinwoo then told her he was going in and started stepping into the gate. In the woman's mind, she secretly hoped that Jinwoo might trip and twist his ankle. Once Jinwoo entered, the other Hunter Association members were shocked and exclaimed, "What's that?" "The gate is." They noticed that the gate was changing color. The woman then shouted, "A red gate." She wondered if this had happened because she had wished harm on Jinwoo. Meanwhile, Jinwoo, having entered the gate, muttered to himself that it felt like he had entered a red gate. He found himself in a rainy forest, standing still and observing his surroundings. Jinwoo noticed that the entrance had closed, and it seemed like he would need to push forward a bit. He then thought of his mother, who had once told him, "I just want you to do whatever makes you happy." After his awakening, his mother had said there was no reason to stop him. Besides, as an S-rank hunter, it was his duty to save as many people as possible, just like his father had done. His mother had also told him that his father had been a firefighter before becoming a hunter. She had fallen in love with him after seeing him rescue people from a fire, and they eventually got married. She reminded Jinwoo that his father's blood flowed in his veins, and there was nothing she could do about that. Her final advice had been to not push himself too hard. Jinwoo smiled, feeling relieved that his mother wasn't against him working as a hunter. He then said, "This dungeon doesn't seem too much of a challenge." Inside the Red Gate, the beasts faced off against Jinwoo's shadow army. His mages cast fire magic that incinerated the beasts, and his generals joined the battle. The chapter ends with the following statement.
Hunters are born to hunt. And magic beasts aren't the only enemies they must fight. Hunters must be careful not to fall prey to others. The tides can change at any given moment. So first-rate hunters never let their guard down. Even though there are tens of thousands of beasts to hunt, hunters will never stop hunting. Not a single hunter has the intention to stop the hunt. Let's move on to the next target.